Hello.
Welcome back,
We're
you
back.
SOSers.
We're back, guys.
You
Don't worry.
You freaking saucers.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, saucers. Welcome to another lovely little episode. We're talking about something, it's so joyous, and that is the healthcare system and how it's destroyed us. But first and foremost, if you like us, which if you're listening and watching us, you probably do, we have a Patreon.
Yes, please jump on there. $3 a month, $7 a month, $11 a month. Really helps us out as we try to grow this and monetize this so we can, make money from things we care about. So
yeah, and the Earthship episode was a really popular one. So if you want us to visit more places and stuff that would help.
Build up our bonus footage, bonus content, extended interviews, exclusive merch. All those things are on the way. I say this year, but I'm meaning within this next year because we are gotten ourselves to that point. So you don't want to miss out on any of that. Shout out to Nija Brooks and Steve, last name.
Ginn. Stevie Weevy.
Because you guys have really held it down for us and our original patrons, and we love you both dearly.
And then thank you, Mommy. Thank you, Miss Nancy.
Yes.
For being a patron yourself.
Thanks,
you got to thank your mom. Come on.
Nah, that is very real. Thanks, Mom.
We are talking about something that, unless we have rich audience members and really well off, which we could, but regardless, you might not, you know what? If you're American, we probably have a majority of American audience, but we also have audiences from other parts of the world as well. And you might not know that our healthcare system is doggy poo-poo.
Yeah.
And the pandemic is only a catalyst to a change in the gig economy, specifically when it comes to workers not getting the health care that they need. And it's kind of with this year putting a spotlight on how truly fucked up it is.
That's independent contractors,
Yes.
any kind of gig worker, obviously
Service
artists, industry, yeah.
As well, it has they suffer from this. The catalyst to this is something that happened to my husband and his mom, my mother-in-law, a couple weeks ago. So what had happened was they had gone to our favorite smoothie place, which isn't far from here. I won't use their names or the names because just in case you're from LA and want to harass them. But they went to this smoothie place and, first, all I know is that they texted me, what smoothie do you want? I tell them. And next thing you know, I'm getting these texts from Ryan being like, oh my God, our barista just passed out.
What?
And I'm like, what do you mean? So basically, they go into the smoothie place. It's just one barista there, smoothie person, maker. And she's by herself. And they see that she has tickets upon tickets of orders from online orders.
Yeah.
And then there was a line of people. And this is a small little smoothie place. You probably know what it is, actually. I'll tell you later. There's 7 people ahead of them. And they could tell right off the bat that she was just like, but as soon as they came up, they're like, you can order whatever you want, but it's going to take maybe 15 minutes. And they're just like, yeah, it's totally fine. We'll just walk around for a bit. They ordered, paid, and then walked around. And then they're like, oh, let's go double check to see, how the smoothies are doing 10 minutes later. So Ryan's mom goes in there first, and she goes in there and she doesn't see anybody behind the counter. So she's like, what? So she's like, maybe she's in the bathroom. So she waits a second, nothing, no one's coming out of the bathroom. She was going to make her way to the bathroom to see if maybe she was in there. And that's when she sees the barista on the ground.
And no other customers were?
No, they were waiting outside. It's really small.
No one knew.
No one knew. So Ryan's mom comes running out of the place, screaming for Ryan to come. And Ryan was kind of by the car, not far away. Ryan runs in and she's just completely out of it. So they're trying to get her up. They're like, oh my God, get up. Are you okay? And she's slowly coming to, but they don't want to move her.
Yeah.
The people that were waiting in line were outside and were getting curious. They were coming in and then she was starting to come to. And one of the other customers were like, oh my God, I should call 911. And all of a sudden, she just starts, when, she's coming to, she's like, no, please don't call 911. Please don't call 911. And they're like, what? Are you sure? She's like, I don't have health insurance. Please don't call 911.
Oh my God.
And they were just, I mean, obviously they were freaked out, and she was explaining that she was by herself. She had gotten like, I think 15 to 20 orders alone, take online orders, and then had all these people, and they like, she was just left alone. I think she suffers from, I forgot what they had told her, and I think they forgot too, that she has some sort of neurological thing where when she's under a lot of stress, she can pass out.
Wow.
But she hit her head really hard.
Oh no.
Yeah. And she was freaked out too because she needs this job. She didn't want to leave, but Ryan and my mother-in-law, they're like, no, like you need to go home.
Yeah.
Like that is your priority. And she's like, okay. So basically Ryan and his mom, they were just like, this is closed. We're done. So they were just like, okay. So the customers walked out, and then I mean, she was still out of it. So they ended up giving her a ride back to her apartment.
Oh my God.
And she was explaining she's from New York, and, you know, yeah, she just can't afford health insurance because.
Was she bleeding? Like she hit her head really hard?
I can't remember. I think they had gotten something for her head. I don't remember if they had told me. But they took a while before she got up because they were afraid of, I don't know, they didn't want her to get up too fast. But yeah, that she has something that was pre-diagnosed, that stress is a huge trigger that could trigger a fainting spell for her. And that is a story that you hear so many times, and she can't afford health insurance. She doesn't get enough hours at her workplace. And, you know, she needs to have enough hours. She also, that's her second job. She babysits as well, and she's in school.
Well, and oh my God.
So
you can't, getting more hours at a job like a smoothie stand isn't going to get you enough money.
and she's a babysitter too. And she's in school. So it's like impossible to, exactly. Like you said, to get those hours. So she's between a rock and a hard place, as many Americans are. And shout out to Forbes and Boston Globe. They had a lot of good articles and stats and things that I didn't know specifically about what everybody goes through in the gig industry, in the service industry. Obviously, we worked in the service industry, so we know a little bit about that. Our hours were cut so we wouldn't get health insurance.
Yeah, they make sure you're just under the amount of weekly hours to have to provide you with benefits.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, the service industry does a lot to make us suffer.
Yeah, they just overstaff so that no one has to quite reach that exact amount of hours. Some days you do, but it's not consistent enough for them to have to offer you benefits.
Yeah, and it's not just that, it's gig workers as well, freelancers. So like, there are about 57 million freelancers working in the U.S. alone, and gig workers were expected to make up 43% of the total U.S. workforce in 2020, that's insane.
Yeah.
Almost half that are freelance gig workers.
Because people had to. They lost their jobs. It's like people are figuring out.
But that means no health care.
Exactly.
So it's like fucked up. The only option besides obtaining a spouse's health care coverage, which is what I'm doing, was to obtain individual private coverage, which was quite an expensive option until the American Rescue Plan was passed in 2021, earlier this year, and drastically changed the private health insurance landscape for everyone, including workers. But the cost is not only the only way gig workers are disrupting the healthcare market. This particular workforce segment is already quite insignificant, and it's only expected to grow from here. Quite significant, sorry, not insignificant. And its growth will naturally disrupt the healthcare industry today, which will have to evolve in order to cater to this relatively untapped market. So like the fact that it makes up so much of our economy, that's 43, it's almost half, of our economy, like healthcare has to evolve. Healthcare has to shift. And it's like nowhere, even with the plan that was passed earlier this year, it's nowhere near what it needs to be.
And like gig workers and independent contractors oftentimes are taking on really high stress jobs. And those probably will require mental health support. I mean, honestly, the amount of just being in the service industry with Alyssa, like it really takes a toll on your mental health. It honestly does after a while. And just any customer service job, it's high anxiety, high stress. You're condescended to all the time. And so aside from the physical aspect of healthcare, like that girl passes out and you need a doctor's assistant, you should be able to have that. There's also the part that is even less considered, which is like, do we provide emotional and mental support for these people doing these extremely tough and dangerous, oftentimes dangerous jobs, especially during a pandemic, but then there's dangerous jobs otherwise. You know, it's just like these jobs are some of the hardest ones out there.
Yeah, it's emotional abuse and it ends up being physical abuse, if not like already, but indirectly years after because of how fucking fucked up the emotional abuse is. And like basically how it needs to evolve is that gig workers would require work specific coverage because even if they don't work with a specific employer, they usually work similar gigs. Drivers, for example, whether they are driving for Lyft or Uber, require healthcare plans with decent coverage for injuries, orthopedic surgeries, rehabilitations, etc. And during COVID-19, these ride-hailing and delivery drivers were more vulnerable to transmission due to the confined space and contact with multiple strangers.
Same with servers.
Yeah. Oh my God. We know many restaurants, one in particular, that had to shut down because of this, because it's just so fucking easy. And about 60% of one platform's ride-hailing and delivery drivers opted for higher tier marketplace healthcare plans, higher cost, more coverage. Ironically, the cost of coverage for such drivers has been reduced by more than 50% since March 2020. And similarly, gig workers that take on high stress gigs might require like we were saying, mental health coverage, therapies, and consultations. And people who primarily seek online gigs may require coverage for conditions that arise from sedentary lifestyles.
Yeah.
So it's like there's so many different facets to what a gig worker could be. And then that thus requires the healthcare that relates to it.
And it's the thing that's, I think, one of the biggest problems with our system is that we don't, and I'm sure everybody's heard this phrase before now. It's like, it's not healthcare here. It's sick care because nothing's preventative.
No.
It's like you wait until someone has a heart attack. You wait until someone like,
exactly.
Yeah. Like, all these things that we wait until it's already a developed condition. And then we try to treat that and prescribe. If you have health care, that's what it will cover. Like, we don't really, a lot of plans don't even if you have a plan, they don't cover anything until you've had an incident, as opposed to just like preventative, which is why, these types of jobs are so many things that, like, if you're taken care of on all these realms, the chances of something popping up that is really serious, it shouldn't happen until later in life when it's a combination of old age, or it shouldn't be happening to a 20-something-year-old girl passing out behind a smoothie stand. It shouldn't be happening like that.
No. And isn't that just the American way?
Yes.
Like, that's the same thing with our justice system. Like, there are so many stories of women who, and I don't know if you're following the Gabby Petito.
Yes.
Have you heard about that? I mean, I follow her, and that's a fucking issue, but also shout out to Indigenous and women of color who are also missing every day.
Also in that exact area, there's I think in the last 2 years, there were over 30 or 50, which is a big difference, but still tens of Indigenous women that have gone missing in that exact same area in the last 2 years that has never made the news. This does not take away from Gabby's situation.
No, but I mean, specifically, this highlights the system that mimics the healthcare system, in that, so because you saw the body cam footage of when they were pulled over.
No.
Okay, so with Gabby specifically, there was a 911 call. Someone saw them in Utah fighting. He was punching and slapping her, and someone called 911. And then when the cops came, basically they treated her as the abuser because there were scratches on his face. They were obviously defense marks.
Oh my God.
But this happens all the time, where women will call 911 and complain about a stalker, about an abusive boyfriend, and they don't do anything. Well, we can't do anything because he hasn't done really anything yet. Until she's fucking dead or missing, does anyone care? And in that instance, she was failed by those officers.
Yeah, and that's if you're white.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it's like she was failed by those officers. And it is that same thing with it's preventative versus,
like reactionary, care.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like, not only until it gets to the very worst case scenario will you have any sort of protection. And that's if you have privilege as well.
And then people saying, oh, well, that means the system is broken. But really, it just means, no, it's working the way it was intended to, because really the way our society is set up with big pharma, who is funded a lot by government, it's like there's more economic benefit for these big corporations if people are sick and need to be prescribed stuff that now seems it's so common. Like, oh, I'm on Adderall. Oh, I'm on Xanax. Oh, I'm on antidepressants. It's like so normal that, there's a benefit to prescribing these. Big pharma, it's just, how am I trying to say? The justice system is the same thing.
Yeah.
So,
it's the American way, baby. As American as apple pie.
And it's, the incarceration rate is insane. In this country, it's the highest. And also in Los Angeles County, I think it's the highest in this country.
It is.
And it's just, it's actually designed that way. The more people we incarcerate, the better. So in order to incarcerate these people, they have to have committed crimes, which means you don't want to prevent the crime.
Yep.
Because then you can't fill up the system. And it's that way with healthcare.
It's so fucking backwards.
It is so twisted.
And when it comes to the service industry, there's a lot of servers like us who were servers and that aren't like jumping for joy to get back into the industry at this point. And the restaurant industry is taking a hit because of that. So like some stats with there, because I found this fascinating. According to a recent survey, 45% of restaurant owners were unable to pay rent this past August in 2021. 52% of minority-owned small businesses still could not afford their rent for the second month in a row. So it's like everyone's like struggling. 30% of all small businesses in the U.S. could not pay their August rent in full or on time. That's slightly better than July, which was 35%. And in terms of states, New York is the #1 state where SMBs are having, small businesses are having trouble covering their rent for the second month in a row. 41% they said they couldn't do it. Other states that are also struggling are Connecticut at 39%, Wisconsin at 38%. We have a really cool chart that I don't know if we can
post it.
Post it, yeah. Check that out. You can see like restaurants, entertainers, artists, retail, and how every single business is suffering right now. So like healthcare, it just coincides with that. Like the health concerns of patrons are combined with the concerns of restaurant employees, entering into a high-touch, high-traffic world of constant contact. While the National Restaurant Association says that every state added jobs recently, employment levels remained below pre-pandemic levels.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They added jobs only because all jobs were cut. So it's not like, oh, great, we're adding jobs to the previous economic state. No, this is just still less than it was in like March 2020.
Yeah. So restaurants are adding jobs, but just no one's applying for them because of this it's so high risk in so many ways, not even just with the pandemic, but in ways that we talked about already. Like we were struggling with physical and mental health issues prior to the pandemic working in the service industry. And I'm sure so was the girl who was at the smoothie place. Like, there's this one person she's the founder of In the Weeds. It's a Boston-based nonprofit organization advocating for the physical and financial and mental health of hospitality professionals. Her name is Elle Jarvis. She says that the restaurant industry is not always conducive to good mental health, obviously.
Wow.
At its core, she says, our job working in restaurants is to take care of people, but this type of labor doesn't necessarily afford the luxury of the individual to take care of themselves. And the restaurant sector has one of the highest rates of substance use disorders, which is another thing in the United States, with one study classifying 41% of restaurant workers aged 18 to 29 have really bad drinking problems.
Oh, and we saw that. I'm not even shocked by that even at all. That's just the culture.
Yeah. And I'm sure that's like a very modest.
I think that's very modest.
And Elle Jarvis says the high prevalence of substance use can be attributed not only to the inherent stresses of the job, but also to the lack of benefits and nature of perks available to workers.
That's what happens. You get resentful. You're there. You're resentful that you're not taken care of or valued, or that you have a job that demeans you all day.
Yep.
And then somebody, someone in the back, one of the cooks is like, do you want a shot of this tequila? A rough night? And you're just like,
fuck yeah.
Yeah. Because I hate everything here.
That was literally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. All the time. Sorry. She says, in the restaurant industry at large, healthcare is not offered. A benefit for an employee is that you get 2 shift drinks after work. So instead of getting the tools of understanding how to manage boundaries and microaggressions from guests, customers, and also coworkers, you're then rewarded for a job well done at the end of the night with alcohol. That's basically like...
But that's the nice restaurants.
And those are the nice ones where they give it to you for free or you have to pay them, which was kind of what we had to do. But it's fine. Like We made it out, I guess. But now, as the hospitality industry struggles to get back to life, perhaps it's time for all of us to acknowledge that a living wage and access to healthcare should be a given and not a perk.
Exactly.
And even now, relatively few, if any, health insurance companies are preparing plans targeted specifically towards gig workers, and they are still trying to create individual health insurance plans. Regardless, offering coverages and policies designed specifically for gig workers will become true competitive advantage for companies seeking to grow in the coming years.
Yeah.
So it makes sense financially for these health insurances to evolve to cover these gig workers because, again, like we said in the beginning, they make up almost half of our job sector.
You know, and I know this definitely isn't the case in all restaurants, or with all sections of the restaurant, I will say, because a lot of the guys in the kitchens that we worked in are like middle age, but a lot of servers are 20s, 30s, most. And so, you know, it's not even that crazy to provide health insurance for people that are typically in their physical prime or pretty healthy. Not that they have a healthy lifestyle because I work in restaurants, but it's not like you're asking them to provide health insurance for a whole staff in their 60s.
No.
You know, so and that's just restaurants. I know it all varies, but that stuff shouldn't even matter. But if you try to argue with capitalism, that's one of the arguments you might want to make. But at the same time, it's like, you know, it has to evolve. And what is going to need to happen is that restaurants taking a step and then servers or any gig workers flock there and then it becomes a competitive rate and they just have to bump each other's offerings up.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I mean, this pandemic has like spotlight so many things that's wrong with our capitalist stupid society. And I hope not only is healthcare, I hope healthcare evolves to support service industry and healthcare people, but also when it comes to just who runs them. And like she and us, our hours were reduced so we wouldn't get health care. And like they have to be held accountable for when they do that. And we're not the only industry that does that. Ryan's industry in the IATSE, and I don't know if anybody out there knows or we've talked about it, IATSE is their union and they struggle with this too, with their health insurance and being used and abused. And that's a whole thing. They're about to go on strike. And it's maybe we can do an episode about it. I don't know. But I encourage you to look into that industry too, because people are just IATSE, sorry. So they're basically the crew for film and television and stage. International Association. Yeah, just know their crew. All crew. Camera, lighting, makeup, wardrobe, art direction. Everybody is under that umbrella, and they're all being used and abused in the same way that we're talking about with gig workers. I guess they're gig workers.
Yeah, they are.
The day. And in service industry. So that is a problem.
Yes.
I encourage you to look that shit up because it's fucking crazy. So shout out to the National Health Foundation. They were founded in 1973 to conduct research and educational programs related to healthcare delivery, particularly in hospital settings. Just as the field of public health was evolved over the years, so has National Health Foundation's purpose. Today, we know that health starts where people live, learn, work, and play. The NHF is committed to improving the health of under-resourced communities by partnering with residents, local organizations, and government entities in order to achieve health equity for all. So to learn more and donate, please visit nationalhealthfoundation.org. And it's so ridiculous that we live in a country where someone has to yell, please don't call 911. And you can actually look on YouTube. There's like montages.
Oh, I'm sure.
And like, you know, if you happen to catch an accident, car accident or whatever, and people are like, no, please don't call 911 because they can't even afford an ambulance. Hundreds and thousands of dollars.
And the first thing that they think when they come back to consciousness after passing out is about that. That should tell you something.
That is their priority. It's so backwards. It's so sad. My heart goes out to her. We've tried to find her again, but she's never working when we go back in there to see how she's doing.
Quit and found something that she can sustain herself on.
Yeah, but I'm glad Ryan and my mother-in-law were there to help her and take her home. And it's just sadly she's just she's not a monolith. Everyone has that kind of story here. So
if anything, if you're not in a service industry or a gig worker or independent contractor, or even if you are and you go somewhere where you're allowed to tip, just do it.
Oh yeah, come on now.
But follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the SOS Pod. Please subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, Google,
YouTube.
on YouTube. Rate and review. It really helps us reach more in the algorithm. Join our Patreon, as we mentioned at the top of the show.
Hell yeah.
Support us for a little bit each month. It really helps. We're growing this coming year, so you can definitely help out with that. And I'm Molly Cottrell.
I'm Melissa Rosano.
And here's to turning meltdowns
into magic.